Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this hump day. It's Wednesday. Yes, yesterday we had a little bit of pressure on the markets right out of the gate, and that continued all the way to the close. All three of the major indices closing, call it right around that 1.6% move to the downside. All three of them pretty identical. That's something we don't see very frequently. We've seen a lot of gyrations, and we're seeing a little bit of that today, as a matter of fact. But before we get to that, how about that bounce in crude? We got to new highs, at least multi-year highs. We got back up towards that 107 level for the price of crude yesterday. That was something that definitely stood out. Also, since Friday, looking at that 10-year and seeing the 10-year getting up and over 2% and then pulling all the way back yesterday, actually underneath 1.7% at one point. What an amazing move. And the velocity of that move, that was just on Tuesday. So think about that. From Friday to Monday to Tuesday, it doesn't sound like a lot probably for a lot of people, but I will tell you that is a massive move. And because of that, we watched those rates move. We also watched the financials come under some very, very serious pressure yesterday. As a matter of fact, they were down early, a little over 1%. They finished the day down almost a little bit over 3.5%. So gives you a little bit of an idea of the reaction. Now, we're still focusing forward. We're looking at the Fed. We're watching the 10-year, watching the price of crude, listening and hearing all about what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. There are plenty of catalysts out there right now for the markets to be moving the way that they are. So a pretty significant move yesterday. We also had volatility absolutely screaming yesterday as well. We got all the way up towards that 35 level before we closed closer to 33. So that was a big part of what we were seeing yesterday as well. So at the volumes, that was at 40 million. That was pretty impressive. Once again, we continue to be very, very close. We're actually 39.7 million to be precise. But we can actually roll up a little bit and say it's 40 million. So about 40 million contracts trading again yesterday. That definitely something that stands out. Technology under pressure. That was down a couple of percent. Semiconductors down about 3% yesterday. Semiconductors really have been struggling for the better part of this year. And certainly yesterday, a big day as well. Materials down about 2.5%. But oh boy, that energy just continues to be in the green. That was up a little bit more. Finished the day up about 1%. There was a lot of different names moving around. On the negative side, we talked about financials. You look at JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, American Express, Capital One, Regions Financial. Some of these probably just getting caught up in the wash. Others actually with exposure and some of the obvious reasons based on just what we were seeing in the 10-year. Huge move to the downside. Those names all getting hit. Lucid post earnings. Took a big hit yesterday as well. I talked about those semiconductors. You look at AMD, Marvell, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, all of those under pressure yesterday. Some of the bigger names in the Dow as well, definitely pulling down on the Dow. When you look at Boeing, you look at Nike, those names certainly down significantly and pulling on the markets. Now, you look over on the other side, though, you do see Chevron. Yes, that's part of the Dow. Exxon once was, no longer. But those integrated names having a great day. The beta energy names having a great day as well. You look at names like APA, you look at Occidental, ConocoPhillips, all having a very, very strong move on the day. Although they didn't close on the highs, they still had a very, very nice move. Target off of those earnings yesterday, around 10% to the upside. That's a pretty significant move that we were seeing out of Target, and those numbers and their competition and all of the things that went into that earnings. They really did perform very, very nicely, and they're rewarded with that performance, certainly by how that was moving. We talked about defense yesterday a lot. Lockheed Martin, definitely one of those names that was really getting pushed to the upside. Really, you just look over at the last couple of days, that's a stock that's had a very, very significant move to the upside, as well as a name like Alcoa. We talk about materials and some of these other names as well. Alcoa had a really, really amazing day and performance yesterday. So today, we get into today, the focus is back on. Again, we're looking at the Fed. Fed is on TV right now as we speak. We're listening to Chair Powell as he's going through the testimony. And so that was something people were anticipating, getting a little bit of a lift out of the 10-year today, back up towards that 179 area for the 10-year after being 168 yesterday on the lows. So that's something that's definitely starting to move around the market. As a matter of fact, we started off the day strong, 150 or 160 points on the Dow, up about 60 or so on the NASDAQ. 15 minutes before I came on, the NASDAQ was in the red. So it had gone all the way up to being up about 120 points very rapidly, and then pulled all the way back into negative territory, only just to turn and burn right back again. It gives you a little bit of an idea. When I talk about velocity and when I talk about movement, that's the thing that sometimes folks don't understand about the measurement of this volatility index either, because they hear about it, they see it, but they don't really fully understand the movements that we get. That has to be factored in as well. The fact that we were up 120 points, all of a sudden we're down 20 points on the NASDAQ. Next thing you know, we're up about 80 points on the NASDAQ. All of that in a very, very short 30-minute stretch of time. Gives you a little bit of an idea. When we talk about volatility, we talk about velocity. These are exactly why we bring those up, because it is something that is a huge factor that goes into what we are seeing each and every day. Crude got all the way up towards 111. Last I looked, it was right around 108, so it had pulled back, but still higher than yesterday and having a pretty good day as well. Energy, of course, leading early on. It led right out of the gate, and last I looked, we were up close to 2.5% for energy, although that's obviously adjusting very rapidly. Financials with a little bit of a bounce back. Talked about the 10-year. We're listening to the Fed. Financials had a little bit of a bounce back, up about 1% or so today. Look over at technology, at least early on. Technology was strong. Semiconductors were strong, both in positive territory. Had a little bit of a slip from tech, a slight slip from semis, and then they both bounced right back again, obviously reflected by what we were seeing in that same move within the NASDAQ itself. Las Vegas Sands, Wynn, Ross Stores, all of those seem to be winners, at least for today. It's always interesting to say that because things do change very rapidly. Beta energy names, again, starting off pretty well. You got Baker Hughes. You've also got Occidental starting off pretty nicely. Then you look over at semiconductors. Early, I said they started off okay. They kind of eased back. Then they jumped right back again. But looking at some of the names, we left Qualcomm, we got Marvell, we got Micron moving. Also, we go back to Lockheed Martin today after a couple of very, very strong days. A little bit of a pullback, very understandable. You'd expect something like that. Last I looked, it was down about 4%, but that makes some sense after this big run over the last couple of sessions. Dollar Tree under a little bit of pressure. DocuSign under a little pressure. Some of those Chinese names that have had some good days of late, a little bit of a backpedaling today as well with Baidu and PDD and JD and those kinds of names, and Neti as well. Neti's another one of those names that gets pushed to the downside. And Zoom, add that one in there as well. So got two unusuals, and then we'll be jumping out of here. So first one, we're looking at GDX. Now, we talk about this a lot. We talk about gold. We've had GLD. Now we're seeing GDX. We actually even saw a little GDXJ, some of those juniors, but the GDX, miners, gold miners, this index, pretty interesting. 10,000, April, 38 calls being purchased. Hedging those, selling the 42 strike calls against those 38s, but focusing on the 38s, they paid about 84 cents for the 10,000 of those on the GDX. That was a pretty good sized trade right out of the gate this morning. NVIDIA also very early on. Stock was below 240, had a buyer of 9,000 of the March 4th 240 calls. They bought 9,000 of those for $3.40 up to about $4.50. I did see it slip back not long after the buying. Not sure where it is right now, but we were seeing that little bit of a bounce back in the NASDAQ as well as the semiconductors. So anyway, those prices are probably fairly close to where the stock is now because that was around this level where it is. So that would make a little bit of sense as well. Should be a very, very interesting day. We know it's going to be volatile. We're keeping an eye on the 10-year. Obviously, everything that's going on the television right now and listening to Fed Chair Powell as he's trying to discuss all of what's going on with the Fed and the considerations that they are making and being questioned, maybe grilled a little bit as well as he's sitting up there. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.